I oppose Brexit. I oppose it in principle, but there is absolutely nothing, or was nothing, inevitable about the mess that Brexit became. That has been down to the lack of planning before the referendum. I would say the lack of honesty with voters before the referendum, and all these ridiculous red lines put in place by Theresa May.
But it hasn't happened yet.
May.
With respect, with respect, you are talking hypothetically. It hasn't happened yet. We haven't actually Brexited. That's my point. My point to you is, if you had won independence and you hadn't got it, you'd be absolutely spewing like a volcano, and quite rightly.
My point is, ahead of the independence referendum, we did the planning and the thinking that was necessary to implement that decision had it gone the opposite way to how it did go. We had the white paper, which people argued over and agreed with or disagreed with, but we thought through all of those implications. We'd been honest with people up front about some of the trade-offs that would be required. One of the most controversial policies was the proposed currency union. People in Scotland, ahead of the 2014 referendum, were incredibly well informed about the issues, and the contrast between that and the Brexit vote, frankly, couldn't be starker. And what I was talking about in terms of the mess the Brexit process has become is not hypothetical. It's real. The reason that the House of Commons can't come together and agree a way forward is that there was no consensus before the vote Brexit actually meant in practice. And nobody was prepared to be honest.
That is not the reason. The real reason why Parliament has not agreed any deal for Brexit is that 3/4 of Parliament actually voted to remain. They don't want Brexit to happen. So when they bang on about democracy and prorogation and so on, the absolute truth of this is that Parliament, for 3 years, in my opinion, has systematically done everything in its power to prevent the will of the people and the way they voted in the majority in that referendum from happening. And I say that as someone who voted Remain and still would vote Remain again tomorrow. Well, you may laugh, but 17.4 million people, I believe...
I'm laughing because I can't get a word in edgeways.
Well, they have every right to feel betrayed by Parliament.
You'll stop laughing about that soon.
Well, they have every right to feel betrayed by Parliament.
With the greatest of respect, Piers, and I hesitate to say this because I'm sure I'll pay a price for it, but I think you're wrong. And let me say that from somebody who also voted Remain in a country that heavily voted Remain. After the vote, I put forward to Theresa May at the time a compromise proposal. OK, let's have the UK leave the EU, but let's stay in the single market and the customs union. Nobody really contemplated during that referendum being dragged out of the single market and the customs union. So that was possible compromise grounds that Remainers and Leavers could have come together
Nicola Sturgeon.
And yet that was completely...
I'm not letting you get away with that. It is complete nonsense. The Prime Minister of this country, the week before the referendum...
I put forward a compromise proposal.
Well, David Cameron made it crystal clear as the Prime Minister, a week before the referendum, be under no illusion. He said, this is a once-in-a-lifetime vote, there won't be another one, and it will mean coming out of the single market. He couldn't have made it any clearer. Everybody knew when they voted that if you voted to leave, we were leaving. We weren't staying partly in, we were leaving. I knew that. I mean, why didn't you know that? How did you not know that?
Johnson.
Yeah, because Boris Johnson at one stage said that it was possible we could stay in.
Boris Johnson, stay in the single market. But the point I'm making, you're saying that there are Remainers who were never reconciled to the vote. What I'm saying to you, and it's factually correct, is that people like me put forward potential compromise options, and they were completely dismissed out of hand in favour of this hard-line interpretation of the Brexit vote that Theresa May and others wanted to pursue. And, you know, that is the kind of implications, the hard-line interpretation, the hard Brexit, now the possible no-deal Brexit, and the consequences of that, which are severe for people the length and breadth of the UK.
But the reason
I mean,
Boris
in Scotland,
Johnson...
and this is the case across the UK,
but the reason
we have an estimate that says our economy will tip into recession. Why should we accept that?
I don't interrupt you, but the reason that Boris Johnson is doing what he's doing, pressing the nuclear option, if you like, is because for 3 years, Parliament has done everything it can to stop any kind of deal going through whatsoever. They've rejected it time and again in massive numbers.
And
the reason, again, I come back to you, how can it be democratic when the country is asked to vote in a referendum, they vote overwhelmingly, 17.4 million people, to leave the European Union. 3 years later, we still haven't because 600 and... How many MPs are there? 650? 650 MPs in this country have decided because three-quarters of them voted to remain, that they're simply not going to pass any kind of deal which would make Brexit happen. That is the reality of where we are. So when people say Boris Johnson is betraying democracy, I say, what about the parliamentarians who have steadfastly betrayed democracy now for 3 years?
Well, that's your interpretation of what happened. It's not my interpretation. I'm the First Minister of a country that voted overwhelmingly to remain. Notwithstanding that, I put forward a compromise proposal. The House of Commons hasn't voted yet to leave because no proposition has been put forward to leave that wouldn't do real and lasting and untold damage to the country.
That's not why nothing's gone through. The reason nothing's gone through is
that's your opinion.
No, my opinion is fact.
That's your opinion.
Three-quarters, my opinion is fact.
No. Your opinion is
That's delusional, Piers Morgan.
This opinion is fact.
Can I finish one point, Piers?
Do you dispute, Nicola?
Can I finish a point?
Let me ask you one supplementary, then you can come back to your point. Do you dispute that three-quarters of Parliament voted Remain? You don't dispute that, right?
No, I don't. But your point, I voted Remain and desperately
and you don't want Brexit
remain,
to happen, do you?
How can you square that?
Because you don't want Brexit to happen.
A compromise option.
Every part of your waking day is designed to stop Brexit happening and force through independence. You love this chaos because what you really want is to get out of the UK. We all know that. Now, I would admire you more if you stared down the barrel of that camera and say, Piers, you're right. I hate Brexit. I don't want it to happen. Sod the voters and get us out of the UK. That is your position, right?
I'll look down the barrel of the camera and say two things. Firstly, you love the sound of your own voice, which is fair enough, absolutely
coming from you,
entitled to do so.
We all love the sound of our own voices.
Exactly.
If we don't, why should anybody else?
It takes one to know one. But secondly, yes, I want Scottish independence, but I don't want to see the rest of the UK destroy itself in the process. Now, let me finish the point and make two quick observations. Firstly, I'm somebody who voted Remain and yet put forward a compromise option to leave the EU but stay in the single market and customs union that was rejected. So that negates the argument you are making. Secondly, we were told that Brexit was all about bringing back sovereignty to the parliamentary democracy that we are supposed to live in. And now we have a government that is prepared to shut down Parliament and ignore the law. Now, I simply say to anybody who's cheering Boris Johnson on in that to think how they would feel if a government that they didn't agree with was shutting down Parliament and ignoring the law in order to push through a policy that they didn't support.
I know, but Nicola Sturgeon, can you not understand?
And MPs have to step up and do something about it.
You've said it's dangerous times for democracy, accused of Boris Johnson of acting like a tin pot dictator. But do you not have sympathy for those people who believed they were taking part in a democratic vote where their decision would be respected? And 17.4 million people who thought they had won that referendum now feel like their views, their opinion, their democratic rights are being trashed.
Yes, I do have sympathy for that. They were let down by politicians like Boris Johnson, who were not honest with them about the complexities and the implications. And I go back to a point I made. I speak to people in Scotland, although we voted by majority to remain. I speak to people here who voted to leave, and I've yet to speak to anybody who thought they were voting for potential shortages in food, that thought they were voting for a situation where they might not be able to get essential medicines, who thought they were voting to tip the country into recession and in a Scottish context to see tens of thousands of people losing their jobs.
And I've spoken to people who feel when you say to them they didn't understand the complexities, that what you're actually saying is those people were too stupid to know what they were voting for. And that's
with respect, Susanna, that is not what I'm saying.
No, but that's what people are hearing.
That is not what I'm saying. I'm not saying... Well, you can talk about the conversations you're having. I talk about the conversations I'm having. That's not what I'm saying. But people do feel that they were let down and misled by politicians, that if there had been more frankness about the complexities, then we might have thought, or they might have thought in advance, and I'm talking here about the politicians, about some of the difficulties and planned for them, rather than simply say to people, it will all be all right on the night.
Which of those apocalyptic things that you've just talked about has actually happened?
We haven't left yet.
Well, we haven't left the EU yet. Piers.
Right.
I mean, but I'm
so do you
the
accept
First Minister of Scotland, and I'm spending a lot of my time...
is just what you think may happen, right? You accept that?
It's not what I think may happen. It's what people are telling. It's what experts are telling
well, it's
me.
what experts are telling you, but they're the same experts. They're the same experts who told us, if I remember rightly, that if we took a vote to leave, within weeks, they said, of that vote being taken, we would be in recession with 800,000 job losses. In fact,
well,
our economy, bizarrely, is performing better than Germany, for example. How's that happened?
Everybody knows the economy is not doing nearly as well as it should be doing, and that Brexit is the reason for that.
Is it doing better than Germany?
That as somebody who has responsibility
is it
for
doing
the country,
better than
I'm
Germany?
supposed to ignore.
Do you accept the UK economy is doing better than Germany?
Look, I'm trying to make a point about no deal implications here.
And I'm asking you, is the UK economy doing better than Germany?
In certain respects. It may well be in certain respects.
Well,
is it doing as well as it should be?
How has that happened, given Germany stayed in the European Union? If all of this...
Look,
exactly, it's my point. No one knows, do they? They're all just talking nonsense to suit their own agenda. We know what your agenda is. Your agenda is to stop Brexit happening and leave the UK. That's it. That's what you want to happen. I get it.
I want Scottish independence.
I get it.
I want Scottish independence. I don't think anybody is under any illusions about that. But I don't want to see my country, I don't want to see the UK crashing out of the EU without a deal, because I'm not prepared to ignore, as somebody with responsibility for a country, all of the warnings I'm getting about the implications of that. I'm chairing every week right now no-deal planning meetings to look at how we deal with the implications of that. And it's crazy that we would be contemplating allowing it to happen.
If we don't accept the result of this referendum and we don't Brexit and you guys win, right, you know, you bring down the government and Corbyn takes over down here and everything gets reversed, why should anybody vote in any future referendum? For example, a future Scottish referendum. Why should anybody vote in any referendum again in the United Kingdom if the result of that referendum is simply ignored? Explain to me.
Well, of course, Piers, if we don't Brexit, then the result of the referendum in Scotland on Brexit will be honoured, not ignored, because, you know, I keep having to remind you, 62% of people in Scotland didn't
It doesn't matter. You were part of the United Kingdom. It doesn't matter. You keep saying something that's irrelevant.
It's not a particularly strong case. It's not a particularly strong case for staying in the Union to say the views of Scotland simply don't matter.
They do matter, but you lost.
With whatever is imposed upon us.
Nicola Sturgeon,
you lost
and you won't accept defeat.
We won the EU referendum in Scotland. We voted to remain.
No, but you're part of the United Kingdom.
That's an incontrovertible fact.
You remain, at the moment,
part
of the United Kingdom.
Well, if your argument is that as part of the United Kingdom, Scotland's views and Scotland's votes don't count for anything, then thank you very much.
You're making the case for independence
very powerfully for me.
I do respect the views of people in Scotland, and their votes absolutely count, which is why you in your last... Well, it's why you in your last independence referendum got a crushing defeat, right? That's what Scotland told you.
We're not independent, and we're having the implications of not being independent spelled out for us very clearly right now. It means that we can be taken out of the EU against our will. We can crash out with no deal, with all of the damage that will do to us. And the argument that this situation is making loudly and clearly is that the best future for Scotland is to be independent, so that we can chart our own course and be in charge of our own destiny.
So the best future for Scotland is to be completely independent from any control by other people. That's the brave new world, but for... Hang on. We can't leave the EU
nothing if not predictable
because
here.
For the complete opposite reasons.
You're nothing if not predictable.
Thank you very much.